All right, we are back and we have a special guest with us today, hailing from Australia's Sunshine Coast. Her impressive junior career was capped with qualifying for the Big Show. A rookie season in 2021 demonstrated her elite surfing time and time again. In 2022, under pressure of the mid-season cut, she entered the Margaret River event needing a CT win, which would have been her first, and she delivered on just that. After finding herself relegated to the Challenger in 2024, she put in another blistering string of results, finishing third, and will rejoin the world's best surfers on the CT in 2025. In addition to her professional surfing career success, she's also pursuing a higher education pathway in mechanical engineering to diversify her options in the future. Representing Billabong, DHD, and Sunbum, we have the Sunshine Coast's Isabella Nichols on the podcast. Bella, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, Dave, how you doing? It's always nice to be read out your achievements and accomplishments, because you just forget them. They're in the rearview mirror as soon as they're done. So it's always nice to hear.
Well, and we are the sum of our experiences, right? I think so many of us are like, whether it's imposter syndrome or otherwise, you're kind of just focused on what happened to me this week and it didn't go well or whatever. But yeah, you should be able to build off of all your achievements because you've had so many.
Thank you. Yeah, after my heat yesterday in Brazil, it's always nice to have your tires pumped up a little.
That does happen. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because before we started recording, I think you and I exhausted all the Portuguese we knew. But you're coming to us live at the moment from Sakurama. We've just completed the Challenger Series. What's been going on? How's the event been from your perspective? It was the last event of the season. It qualified all the CS surfers who will join the CT in 2025. What's it been like on the ground there?
Yeah, this is post-finals day after, and I'm feeling absolutely cooked today. I feel like the whole weight of the year has finally just like been lifted off my shoulders. So it's been a nice cruisy day, but it feels really nice to finish the year off here. And Brazil's sick. The food's amazing. The people are great. I wish I knew more Portuguese because that would make my life a lot easier here, but I don't know. It was actually, honestly, such a crazy event. Not only for myself, I feel like watching the emotions go down at this event was one of the most draining and taxing experiences I've ever experienced in my life. Like the boys' side, watching the live rankings every single day go back and forth. I think from fifth place down, it just fully like flipped. We had two Aussie boys qualify, Joel and George, and that was really emotional and crazy to watch. Macy winning the event too, like the Aussies absolutely killed this leg. So yeah, it's been good. Like I didn't have a great last heat, but in hindsight, looking back, I feel like the year and the event went pretty well.
Maybe there's a value in that, right? You don't want to end on like a super high and get comfortable. It's like you had such a good year, but you ended on a little bit of a frustrating note. So you're like, I'm going to use that to fuel my off season to be ready come 2025.
I actually really like that. I'm going to take that because I definitely I left the water definitely not feeling satisfied. And you know how it is, like there's always another event to go to. Like after Portugal, I lost my heat by slipping off and I was like, sweet, I got Brazil. Like I have some redemption, but now there's like no redemption to be had for at least another 2.5 months. So I don't know. I'm going to have to release that energy somehow. And I don't know.
Run with it. I like it. I mean, I've quoted Bane on this podcast before, but you know, he says to Batman, victory has defeated you. You don't want that, especially as a competitor. You need to stay a little bit hungry.
Oh, I think all of us doing the Challenger Series at the moment, like I feel like there's not, except for Fitzy, because Fitzy's just phenomenal and she just dominates and just gets through so many heats. It's been a tough one for everyone. Like there's been maybe like half of the events have gone your way and then the other half it's felt like a little hard. Like sometimes either the conditions are not in your favor or someone else just drops 2 8s and you never really have like that full sense of satisfaction through the year. And it's actually quite nice because I've found like a newfound love of competing and there's always something to learn, especially from every experience. But it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it.
It's interesting you talking about just the vibes on the ground, being so intense. And it sounds pretty similar to like the mid-season cut, but hearing you talk about it, I was trying to think back to like when I started in the time before time, but obviously the QS and the CT season used to finish in Hawaii We had the Triple Crown for so many years. And so you still had those really intense moments of despair and disappointment when people missed out on qualifying. But I wonder if kind of the vibe of being, you're in Hawaii for 6 to 8 weeks with your sponsors, you did your best, it's not so acute as it is where it's like, I traveled all the way to Sakurama, I had to do this, I either did it or I didn't. And it probably just feels so much more intense in that kind of a situation.
It's a lot. Like, I feel like watching the tour as I was growing up, because there was, like, speaking of like the world tour, there was 10 events. Yeah. And by like event 8, you kind of knew where people sat in regards to like the top 10 rankings. And by then, like, the QS was already going on, so you could see who was going to requalify anyway. So I guess for the spectators as well, it's quite exciting. Like, for people on the ground, it's exhausting, but it's exciting to watch too. Not only do you have like that mid-year cut where literally half of the people who qualify or don't qualify, it comes down to that one event, but it's also now with the Challenger Series, I found that that's like accentuated that feeling as well, because we did have like a full year of, there was maybe 20 events sometimes for the guys, and there was about 10 events for the girls. So again, by the time you got to event 7, you kind of knew where people stood and it wasn't too much of a surprise. But coming into Sakurama with 6 events, 4 keepers, it's like the shuffle was so real. Like, maybe not so much with the girls because there was already like 4 spots taken, but with the guys, it was wild. Like, if I were in those boys' positions, like, I'm so glad I was last year. Actually, I was on the beach sitting watching. And I needed to get I needed a few people to lose for me to qualify because I didn't have the best year. The emotions that I felt were some of the strongest I'd ever felt in my life, like stress-wise. And I vowed to come into this year not having to sit on the beach in Sakurama again and hope for the best.
Yeah, and that echoes, like, I remember that pretty vividly amongst the men on the CT back in the day, where it was like, you do not want your requalification campaign to come down to pipe. Like, even though it's a premium wave, it's one of those waves where it's like the ocean can decide if you're getting through or not. And certainly at different points back in the day, it's like, well, you could be drawing a pipe specialist and be in all sorts of trouble. So, it's just the way that kind of went then.
Yeah, and I guess by that point in time too, even like the world title race was being decided. Yeah. It's such a specialist kind of wave, like you said. And I'm not drawing any similarities to Sakurama and pipe, but Sakurama, there's just some people have it and some people don't. And it's like one of the hardest waves to surf because of the backwash and the tides. And so there's some people who just, if you draw them in a heat at Sakurama, you're like, this is going to be tough. And I feel like there was a lot of heats like that for the boys, that there was a whole bunch of matchups in round of 16 onwards where, like, even some of the Aussie boys drew some of the Brazilians, and you're like, this will be a good heat to watch because they're all on fire.
Speaking about people who have it and don't, would you put yourself in the class of people who do? I mean, you finished 3rd. You had a good run, great performances.
Honestly, no. I struggle with this wave. Hey, like, I feel like my surfing is more drawn out, like point break style. And coming here, I always really try to like knuckle down and figure out how to surf this wave. But every day you wake up, it's different. Every day you wake up and it says it's going to be 5 foot and it's 2, or it's 2 foot and it's 5. And I don't know. It's just the pace of the wave here. You kind of can't think too far ahead. And my analytical brain, I'm always like, all right, how am I going to piece this wave together? But you stand up and it does something completely opposite to what you think it will. So that's a challenge for me. Hopefully I can make the cut and make it back here to Sakurama so I can try and figure this place out a little bit more. But this year's been good. Like, I felt like I've learned a lot. I don't think I surfed my best here, but at least I've probably got a little bit more to give, which is good.
Right. You mentioned the cut, and I want to talk about that because in 2025, the WSL's made some updates to the CT. We're going to have an 11-event tour as well as the finals, and the cut's been moved back to CT7 from CT5. And so your run, at least pre-cut, is going to be Pipeline, Surf Abu Dhabi, Peniche, Punta Roca in El Salvador, Bells Beach, Snapper Rocks, and then Margaret River. How do you feel about the updates? You know, your CT career has been exclusively in sort of the post-design update era. You know, how do you feel about what it's been the last couple of years compared to what it looks like in 25?
It's definitely changed for the better, in my opinion. The mid-year cut's really tough, especially considering the first two events for the past 2 years or 3 years have been in Hawaii.
Right.
And as everybody who surfs knows, Hawaii is a really hard place to get waves and a really hard place to like figure out if you're not from there or born there. So that's 2/5 of the tour, like starting off in some foreign, scary, crazy waves. For me, I found that really tough because, you know, you come in and like you may get a good result, but for me, the last 2 years I haven't. And then you're kind of chasing your tail for the rest of like the last 3 events. And I know we have 2 events in Australia and I've had a couple of results here and there, but to be coming from behind is quite difficult. Whereas now with the mid-year cut, there's 7 events beforehand. I feel like it's going to be incredible. I'm so excited. Like, the reason I wanted to qualify this year was seeing Snapper on tour. Snapper was the first event for me that I was supposed to compete in on tour when I qualified. And then obviously COVID year happened and then everything got cancelled. And so now Snapper being back, I get to like sleep in my own bed. I get to surf a CT event at home. It's going to be insane. Like so many right points. We have 3 events now out of 7 in Australia, which is a crazy number. And that's an even more percentage than, you know, the Hawaiians had for the pre-cut. So, I don't know. For me, I'm really looking forward to Snapper and El Salvador. Bells and Margs, they feel like home to me. But now I feel like I'll be able to go into pipe with more of like a focus of, okay, how do I figure out this one wave, which is very challenging, rather than having to figure out sunset as well, because trying to balance both of those through a Hawaiian season was always tricky too.
Right.
But yeah, Abu Dhabi is interesting also. It's going to be obviously a perfect wave. We had Kelly's pool the first year I was on tour as well, and it was one of the scariest experiences of my life. And it's actually where we filmed the first podcast too.
That's right.
It is, yeah, in the trailers next to the pool. But all in all, like this year's going to be so freaking exciting, and all the new faces on tour as well. It's going to be so cool to watch.
Well, I'm going to push you on the new faces thing because, you know, you being on the Challenger Series, your eyes on the ground here. So I want to get your take on, we'll just go through the true rookies, and we'll do men's first and then women's second. So on the men's side, the qualifiers, returning former CT surfers that are now back, we've got Samuel Pupo, Ian Gouveia, Alejo Muniz, David Silva, Miguel Pupo, and I think that's it for the returning CT surfers. So brand new faces from the CS that I want to get your take on. Marco Migno, I may not miss anybody, Joel Vaughn, George Pitar, Edgard Grosjean, and Jackson Bunch. Out of those 5 true rookies on the men's side, like any thoughts? Like who do you think is going to wow people, and who do you think, you know, might need a little more seasoning before they can do it on the CT?
Yeah, so many thoughts. Those 4 boys, like watching them in the past few events has been pretty crazy. Like obviously Marco just won here, and watching his surfing from the US Open, getting second and just building through like the back half of the year, I feel like he's looking pretty unstoppable at the moment. Like if he's in the right headspace, he was throwing some crazy airs, but not only that, like his rail game is really good too. On some open face rights, I feel like he's going to be pretty incredible to watch. The other crew, Joel Vaughn, I feel like he's one to watch for sure. His airs are crazy. Not only like he has really good rail surfing too, but if the kid gets a good punt section, it's going to be like, I feel like his air game is as good, if not better, than some of the guys on tour. So just depending on, I was trying to figure out, there's a few locations like Peniche he's going to be absolutely crazy at. There may be punt sections at the pool as well. I'm not quite sure how that's going to go. He's great in barrels. George Pitar has obviously shown what he's worth at Bells this year. I think he got 3rd at in the event as a wild card. And I've watched him for the past 3 years. His surfing has just gotten better and better and better. And those boys are they've got level heads on their shoulders too. So I feel like they're going to go in like with open eyes and an open mind, and I feel like they're not going to get too ahead of themselves. And now with 7 events on tour as well for the rookies, I feel like it's going to be really beneficial. I feel like the 5-event cut definitely had a disadvantage to the rookies in the previous years, but now that there's 7 events and it's definitely diversified the schedule, it's going to give the rookies a really good shot at like climbing into that top 24.
I love that assessment. And one of the things too, and we'll get to the women in a second, like and it's a fair criticism. It's always been a criticism on the kind of the matriculation up through the ranks to the elite show. Obviously, the CT it pursues a design schedule that has a variety of world-class waves. The QS historically does its best, but it kind of takes whatever it's got. And, this year the CS had a good mix. Like you had Snapper Rocks, which was awesome. But then you've got, beach breaks in Sydney, Bolito, the US Open, the last event at Sakurama, and then the point break of Ericeira. Do you think, and in your experience, have you noticed maybe a little bit of a gap between how the Challenger Series prepares talent wave-wise for the CT? You talked about historically the last couple of years we've started at pipe and sunset. There's not really a pipe and sunset type wave to prepare rookies. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'm gonna flip that and go, I feel like the thing with the Challenger Series, or the main fault, is a lot of the guys that I feel like could compete really well on tour, they maybe sometimes struggle to get to that top 10 position because those waves definitely don't mirror the kind of waves that we have on tour.
Right.
And in saying that, I feel like if those guys, say I'm going to take Jack Robinson, for instance, like he's incredible at CT surfing, but he worked on his QS surfing and now I feel like he's almost better for it. So the guys who deserve to be on tour, like, I feel like they're the ones who will work hard, put in the effort to like improve their game in those, I wouldn't say subpar waves, because we had incredible waves at Snapper. We had really fun waves at Ericeira as well. And Bolito was fun. It's been fun at Sakurama too. But I feel like it definitely doesn't prepare you if you haven't already gone and spent time in those waves. But in saying that, I feel like all the guys now have grown up, like whether it's they're going on trips at like 10 years old to Pipeline. It's just a thing as males, they've had the privilege of growing up and seeing people before them do these same things. I feel like where it varies maybe a little, and it's definitely changing now, is on the women's side. And especially while I was growing up, obviously there was Maui, there was Snapper, there was Bell's Marks. They're not really high performance, like scary waves.
Right.
So I never felt like I had to go out of my way to go and surf those gnarly waves like Pipe and Chopu and Fiji now. I've never been to Fiji and it's 3 hours across the ditch. So I'm planning on doing that in this break. But I feel like on the women's side, it's definitely maybe more noticeable. Like some of the rookies might come on and they've never surfed scary Pipe before, but that's obviously changing now because we've had gnarly waves on tour for 3 years, and the girls coming up know that if they want to qualify, they kind of have to put time in. But on the guys' side, I feel like they've all spent time at those waves. And yeah, my only argument against the Challenger Series schedule is sometimes some of the surfers that do deserve to be on tour find it just a little bit harder to get on.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think like historically that's always been the case, like whether it's the QS or the CS or whatever. But your point on Jack Robinson's a good one, because it made me think of like, well, Bruce Irons and John Florence and people like that all rounded out their surfing to do the QS to get to the CT, right? And these are sort of figures that were historically like high quality wave savants in a way. And so it's a good comparison. On the women's side, you guys, 60% of the qualifying class are going to be true rookies. And you've got Bella Kenworthy, Aaron Brooks, who won a CT this year as a wild card, and then Vahine Fierro, who also won a CT event this year as a wild card. What's your take on the true rookies coming in on the women's side?
Oh, it's so incredible to see like all the young women coming through. It was obviously really sad. Like my good mates Sophie McCulloch and India Robinson, had they not have injured themselves at the start of the season, maybe there would be more veterans and less rookies on tour. But I mean, as everyone knows, like I'm really great friends with Erin Brooks, and I've watched her perform over the last 2 years, and just seeing her progression in the past, I don't even know. Like I watched her when she was 11 doing flips at Waco, and seeing how she's progressed. She won Sakurama last year, and then as she did that, she won Snapper again this year. I'm scared for the top 10. Like it's going to be crazy to watch, and not going to lie, I'm like having her on tour is going to be gnarly because she's such a great surfer, and anyone who draws her, like it's going to be crazy to see how she's one of those surfers I feel like personally has such a good wave game that now she's gotten through the Challenger Series. There's kind of no stopping her. Bella Kenworthy's really surprised me this year. She's always surfed really, really well, but her surfing I feel like has gone to like another level, not just like technically, but I feel like her mindset and her competing and her tactics and heats was definitely like ramped up a notch, and that's what's gotten her through a lot of heats this year. And Vahine was clutch this event. Like props to her. She had to win that heat to make tour, and to do that in such tricky conditions. Like I feel like she also has a really good wave game. So I feel like she's over the past few years, she has struggled in like some of those weaker waves on the Challenger Series, and look out, like she dropped a couple nines at Snapper. Like she's gonna be incredible on tour.
It's a good class. I'm excited for the 2025 CT, obviously including yourself. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back. This is the lineup. I'm Dave Prodan here with Australia's Isabella Nichols. Bella, we've talked about this over the years, but one of the things that has always interested me about you is, in addition to the stellar surfing career you've had, you've also been one of the rare people that's pursued higher education. I think you were working on getting a degree in mechanical engineering last time we talked. Like, can you give us a little update on where that's at and like what that experience has been like?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. I've always loved putting my brain to use, and I mean, I've found a way to kind of like get the brain working through competing, but it never really had that same effect as studying did. I don't know whether that's because like studying, you can kind of like, especially mechanical engineering, it's like a very A plus B equals C kind of deal with physics and whatnot. And then surfing for me is very like, it's very creative. Like there's so many different solutions and applications. And sometimes for my little brain, I like kind of, that doesn't always sit so good because I love having like a pattern. And so I feel like I get that kind of satisfaction from studying. And I'm aligned with a really cool sustainable engineering company called Acciona. And they're a Spanish-based company who have moved to Australia. And I'm looking at possible future work with them after I finish the tour and once I graduate. I even actually, funny enough, had a really cool conversation when I was in the States with Courtney Conlog's dad, who does like aerospace engineering. And I'm like, my brain's starting to like get excited at like all the different possibilities that are out there. And I actually go to schools now and talk to young females about STEM. So it's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And one of the spiels I give is like, there is so many endless opportunities in this field. It's not just, sitting behind a keyboard and punching out numbers. Like there's so many different applications. So for me, like I want to use my brain as much as I can. And right now surfing is like my main focus. And on the side, I'm still studying and doing all that stuff. But I'm actually really excited for what life after surfing is going to look like. It'll be different, but at least I'm still really excited to keep my brain stimulated.
I love that. And I think it's probably why you and I get along so well, is I think we're similarly programmed. Not that you and I probably couldn't, dither in the abstract every now and then, but we love like a scoreboard and like principles and being like, A plus B equals C. And I wonder too, I'd love to get your insights on this, because it feels like you can make an argument that out of all the professional sports on the planet, like surfing in a way is the least static and the least quantifiable and the least analytical in a way. Not to say that you can't get precise on your equipment or precise on your body and your training and your diet, et cetera, but like we just have the most dynamic field of play in all of sports with the ocean. And so it's like there is quite a lot of like not superstition is not the right word, but you know what I mean? It's like the uncertainty of competing. It just seems like it skews so high compared to every other sport.
I think the thing that we battle the most as not just surfers, but as competitive surfers is like the variability, right? Like Mother Nature, I feel like is the greatest variable that you can have in sport. Like I always go on about, tennis, like golf, swimming, you have like a stable field. And then you're also versing the people that you're versing. And with surfing, for my joy and also my discomfort, there is so many things that I cannot control. And it's not just my competitor, but is Mother Nature going to stop the waves from breaking for 14 minutes? Or is she going to shift over to this wide bank while I'm sitting over here thinking the waves have just come through here for the past 2 hours? Like, so in my brain, I'm like, okay, this is where I got to sit. And to my detriment, sometimes, like, because my brain is so regimented, my adaptability isn't I'm not as versatile as other people. And I feel like that's what happened yesterday is like, I'm like, all right, this is the spot. I've done like my study on this wave, like the past few heats, this is where it is. And then all of a sudden my heat started, it shifted over to this outside bank and my brain just went kaput. Like, I know what is going on. But I'm making so many arguments like against, I feel like the one thing that's so beautiful about competing, like in surfing and surfing in general, is that variability and that subjectiveness. And you have a panel of 5 judges and each of them can look at a wave and there can be a spread of like 3 points different sometimes, because one person might think that it was an 8 and one person might think it was like a 6 or a 5. And that's because we all have our own way of interpreting what we love about surfing and what looks good. So I feel like that is the beauty in it in a way. Like, it's so easy to get hung up on, oh, like this person didn't give me this score that I wanted, or like all those different kind of factors. But when you look at it in like a whole context of like what we do, we get to dance on waves and entertain people, and people throw numbers at us for like, they give us an abstract subjective number, even though it's not super subjective. Like, there is obviously structure to it. And we compete against each other to get 2 good waves in 30 minutes. Like, it's so freaking cool.
Like I like to say it's probably like the most passionately viewed, subjectively scored sport on the planet. Like the other ones, like gymnastics and diving and stuff. But I just think like with surfing, there's just so much more of it. There's so many more events. There's so many fans that are like, yes, no. It's really interesting. And like that dynamic field of play thing, it's one of my pet projects in terms of topics I like to talk about. But like,
love it.
It always is like, I feel like the ceiling is so low on swagger and confidence at that point, right? Like, we're hovering around some marketing conversations over the last couple of decades here. People are like, we need like a real like personality and a character and someone who's like this and that. And it's like, it's not that they don't appear in surfing, but you could have someone like LeBron James who's like, I'm the biggest, strongest, fastest, most talented, and I work the hardest. I have opponents, but the basketball court's exactly the same. The height of the rim's exactly the same. I'm going to walk out with a significant amount of confidence and swagger because I know I can do this. And in surfing, that just doesn't exist, because you probably have people that are like, yeah, I'm bigger, stronger, faster. I've got the best approach. I've worked the hardest. And they get out there and the ocean's just like, we'll see. And so like, I'm curious, like, is there anyone on tour, like men or women, who you think does have the most kind of swagger within the system? Because I'm curious if you've noticed someone, because I have a couple of guesses, but like, it just seems like it's tough.
That is absolutely gold. I hadn't really thought about that whole scenario. Like, we don't have a LeBron James, like personality wise in our sport. The closest I would say would be like maybe Gabrielle Medina. And maybe that was even like maybe that was even like post Gabrielle Medina. I feel like now everyone has kind of like, I wouldn't say caught up, but for lack of a better word, like caught up. And now, like, I feel like the level's so high now that there isn't like one person or two people that can go out there and be so overly confident that
Right.
whether they get the worst waves or the best waves, that they can beat everyone. Like, I feel like the level's definitely evened out now.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, Gabe's probably my guy, and even that, like, he's not out there like pre-event Muhammad Ali trash talking as a, like, there's nothing like that. Like, John's obviously a very confident person in the water and looks great, but like, you would never see him be like, oh, I'm going to beat the brains out of this person because they don't stand a chance. Like,
well,
it's like, it's not.
And in like, I feel like there's a stigma around surfing and surfers as well, that it's, and especially in Australia, we have this tall poppy syndrome where like if you talk smack and you talk yourself up and you start like talking people and then you don't perform, like the ramifications of that, I feel like for an ego it's way harsher than just keeping your mouth shut, doing your job. And yeah, the stereotype as a surfer, like it just, the surfing world is small compared to like any other sport. I feel like basketball, the fan base is so large. Not saying that surfing isn't, but it's so hard to like say something in the surfing world and for it not to just be heard by everyone.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like there's definitely that stigma around being a big personality for sure.
It's a good point. Like, and I think you can kind of look at like historical archetypes, like the universal reverence for someone like Tom Curran, who's generally reserved and quiet, and there's an air of mystery and lets his surfing do the talking. But then, you talk to him and you talk to his contemporaries, he was like viciously competitive, right? Like same with someone like Jerry Lopez. Like, there's that great Stacey Peralta film, like The Yin and Yang of Jerry Lopez, and we got to talk to both of them for one of our episodes. And Jerry was like, yeah, like the public image of me was this like hippie soul, like pipeline specialist. He goes, but I was probably the meanest guy in the lineup. Like you don't, he said I had to be. And I wonder too, like probably one of the nearest analogs we have for this in professional surfing was someone like Andy, who wasn't so much of a like confrontational talker, but he definitely cared about like winning, and I remember coming up, it was like, not that there were other surfers that didn't, but he like very much was like, I'm bigger, I'm better, I'm going to win. That was like the vibe he put out. So when he did it, you're like, that's amazing. And when he didn't, it was like just as watchable because it was like, you're like, oh man, this guy's like, he's really emotional about this kind of thing. And it just felt like he was one of those outliers that seemed like he gave a not that you guys all don't, but like he was very public about it.
Yeah, I feel like there's not many personalities like him. And I kind of wish I grew up in the era, like he passed away when I was pretty young, when I was about like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
But I feel like there hasn't been a personality like him since. And I kind of wish there was, because I feel like it would make you really want to get like invested and watch them surfing, because if someone talks a big talk, you're like, okay, like this guy has or this girl has a lot on the line. They've said all these things, like they're going to have to perform. Otherwise, like, I don't know, who knows what will go on. But I don't think we've seen anyone like him since. And maybe one day we will. Like, I feel like surfing and like competitive surfing goes in waves, and we have those big personalities. And I feel like now we're at a point where everyone's just mellow. They just want to get the job done. The other one that I can see coming through that has a really cool personality and not so much as a big personality, but Katie Simmons, I feel like she has her own kind of swagger and cool.
Sure.
And maybe that will inspire like the next generation of women to like actually be themselves and show up, not just trying to fit like a certain image of what a surfer does or is, but bring their own essence to the sport. I feel like she's going to be really great for women surfing.
It's a good one. I mean, I think that like wherever things land on like marketing and caricatures, like, I'm sure there's people out there that are like, oh, you should do what WWE do, like kayfabe and this and that. But it's like, whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, I think one of the most like universal, not universal, but like one of the most tectonic shifts that I've seen on the CT is that, when I started, it was the world's best surfers, but in competition for a lot of reasons, like formats, waves, like, the interpretation of judging criteria at the time, like these are the world's best surfers that weren't surfing their best in heats, but you'd often see them do it free surfing. And at some point over the last 10 to 15 years, like that inverted, and now it's everybody has to surf their best just to get through heats on tour, which is really exciting. And, you have kind of the success of like very naturally talented surfers that do have to work hard as well. I think one of the photographers said something to the effect, this is years ago, where it's like, I'd see like, I would mostly shoot free surfing because the surfers would surf 70% in their heats and 100% when they free surfed. He goes, now it's the opposite. There's no point in shooting free surfing because they're just warming up to surf 100% their heats. And I'm wondering over the last few years, your experience on the CT, if you've sort of felt that in the trenches of just like everyone's going 100% like in every heat. There are no safety surfing heats anymore.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And it makes it really tough because what I've found is like what you do in your free surfs translates directly to your contests, right? And
right.
So there was a time where maybe, you would go out and have a free surf and just cruise and like feel your feet. Whether it's in training, I'm not quite sure how to like articulate this properly, but I feel like now every free surf you have to treat like a heat. So what you do in your training and your practice is directly reflected in your performance. And there was a period of time where maybe I was going out in my free surfs and not like I didn't have the pedal to the floor the whole time. And maybe like in the past 2 years or the last like 2 years ago, I feel like my contest surfing was directly reflected on my free surfing. And obviously following the tour, I'd go out and it's so hard to get waves that when you get a wave, you don't want to blow it. So sometimes you almost undersurf the wave. And then, as I was saying before, like it's directly reflected in the way you surf a heat because you maybe lose it, like lack a little confidence in like, I don't know if I can go for that fin bust because I haven't done one for so long because every time I catch a wave, it's like, I need to like make this count because as we follow the tour, it does become pretty hard to like find waves on those contest banks. So now like over the past year, 6 months especially, like I've just worked on surfing at 100%, both in free surfs and in heats. And I feel like that definitely brings up the intensity and you need that level of intensity because you enter a heat with, say, Tatiana or Brisa or Molly, like you know that they're going to be doing the biggest turns that they can do. And you can't get away with surfing at 70% anymore unless they absolutely have a shocker, which doesn't happen. You have to go Mach 10. There's no other option. Otherwise, especially with the mid-year cut, you're off tour.
Right. Being a professional surfer, I mean, historically, but certainly in 2024, there's lots of ways to do it. Obviously, you have the platform of the championship tour. It's world's best surfing. It's got, millions of eyeballs around the world. But there's, I think pretty much everyone on the CT, they're so multidimensional. Like you mentioned, your background in academia, how you're pursuing that. But even as a professional surfer, like content, free surf trips, even if those trips are not training for the CT or the CS. And I'm wondering over the course of the last few years, have any kind of just non-competitive trips stood out to you in your career, whether they're for a sponsor or just to kind of get some content?
That's something that I've actually been lacking in quite a bit. Like I've been watching the Indo season for the past 2 years and I'm desperately trying to get over there. But every time I do, something pops up. Going on a free surf trip for me is like my number one aim to do in this off season or pre-season. And I feel like that's something that I've definitely lacked on doing. And for me, I think the stress of the past 2 years, falling off tour, requalifying, falling off again, I've almost prioritized like non-surfing trips, which for some might sound detrimental because I'm not working on surfing and performing. But a trip that really stood out to me last year was I went to Denmark and Iceland with my family, and just seeing the beauty in Iceland was one of the most incredible trips I've ever been on. No surfboard bags, which was the most incredible thing because as we know, dragging board bags through airports is the hardcore. But I don't know, for me, getting Indo at the end of this year, if there's a swell, is key. And with the schedule, falling off tour and doing the Challenger series, I did find it really hard to like find and piece together trips that I could do in between contests. But it's something that I need to prioritize. And I've seen a whole bunch of girls, like the crew who requalified through the tour, they've all been in Indo for like the last 2 months. And I definitely have had a lot of FOMO. But
you and I both.
There.
Yeah, I'm bummed too.
But yeah, I think for me, the key, and we might have talked about it in the last podcast, but for me, the key to qualifying through the QS for the first time was actually going on a bunch of free surfs that year. I think I went on 3 free surf trips, had the best time of my life, had so much fun, and ended up, winning the QS that year. And I directly correlate that with enjoying myself while surfing. So thank you for reminding me. I need to go on more surf trips.
There we go. And I feel you. Like anytime I take a little personal or business trip, like I don't even have to check a bag, like board bag or otherwise.
So good.
I'm like, oh my gosh, people do this. Unbelievable. But
yeah, this is the way to do it.
Oh my God. I mean, you, despite being so young, you have had such huge success, both competitively and just professionally. And, you're world traveled. And, as we know, surfing, it exists at this really interesting intersection, right? It's probably happens in the most alien environment on the planet for humans. It happens in the ocean. And you could argue that it happens at the most violent part of that environment where the land meets the sea. And, as a professional surfer, you not only have to survive in this location, but you have to kind of thrive. And, in our new segment presented by Kraken Rum, Scary Stories of the Sea, we want to pick your brain on this a little bit. So step into the dark this Halloween with Kraken Rum and experience the unexpected with the new Kraken Gold Spiced Rum. The Kraken Rum pairs perfectly with mischief, curses, and scary stories of the 7 seas. Delve into Halloween cocktail recipes at krakenrum.com. So, Isabella, what is a scary story? Maybe scary waves or overactive sea life that you've run into during your many years as a professional surfer?
That's a really tough question for me, and I'm going to try and tell the story the best I can, but I'm not the best storyteller. But I feel like for me, one of the scariest waves in the world isn't a shallow reef break. It's Sunset Beach. And if you've surfed there, when it's like 10 foot plus, you'll know why, because if you get a set on the head, you're going to get held under for a long time. And not just once, many times, because there is like sets for days coming through. But I think the scariest moment for me, and a little backstory, I actually never liked swimming and not touching the bottom. We have this thing called nippers at home, and I would be that one kid sitting on the beach crying because I did not want to swim around a buoy where I couldn't reach the bottom. So once the tour announced that there was an event at Sunset, that for me was almost more daunting than Pipeline. And I had to order my 6'9", 7-foot boards, which was absolutely absurd. And there was one day that we paddled out pre-contest. I think it must have been last year before the comp. And there was, I'd say, like a 12 to 14 foot day. Every single CT surfer was out. And everyone like seemed weirdly calm. And I'm sitting there like semi-panicking going, this is very big. And I was pretty wide. And the set of the day came through. If you've surfed Sunset before, usually they come straight on, but if there's a west swell, every now and then this Armageddon comes out from the deep of the ocean, and you can't really see it till it's like pretty close. And by then it's almost too late. Like you're caught out. And I'd say like this 12 to 14 foot set comes through, and I'm there looking at it, Connor O'Leary's next to me. Tatiana is in front of me, and we all bail our boards. I'm pretty sure like every single person bailed their boards in that set. And I came up, my leg rope had completely come off. I was held underwater for about 15 to 20 seconds, super disoriented. Came up and I start automatically swimming to the channel, and that is something that you do not do because that channel like rushes out to sea. So I have Connor O'Leary like on my inside yelling at me, like going, Bella, paddle this way, like do not paddle to the channel. And I'm like sitting here like conflicted, like what do I do? So I start swimming towards the breaking waves, which were still coming through. The sets were coming through like 12, 14 foot. And I'm swimming in, and I reckon I copped about 7 sets on the head. And by the 7th set, I told myself like I cannot cop another set on the head. Luckily there wasn't anything after that, but it took me about half an hour to swim in because it was so big that the water was gushing out. My coach on the beach at the time was trying to film me, and I had a bright vest on, and he couldn't see me for a while. And then he saw my board wash up on shore, and he like jumped up, knocked over the camera, broke the camera, was looking everywhere for me. But I ended up getting in. I think it took me about 40 minutes to swim in. And ever since then, I've been quite traumatized. I took apnea breathing classes at home based off that situation alone because I'd never wanted to feel out of control. But I think almost the whole like CT that one set, like everyone either had like I think Brisa snapped her board, Connor snapped his board, maybe Tati did too. And that is the reason why I am petrified of sunset.
That was well told. It's so interesting too, because it's I had the benefit of staying there for a number of years when we were touring during the Triple Crown, and surfed it certainly at more civilian sizes than you're describing, but it is so deep, right? Like, and I think as surfers, probably most surfers everywhere are more than familiar with like very shallow days, right? Whether it's like over a reef or over a sandbar and you're aware of the dangers. But there is something a little bit reassuring where it's like, well, I'm going to bounce and then I'm going to come up. You know?
Exactly.
And at sunset, like, you know, you surf a bigger board, it's an 8-foot board or whatever, and you have a huge leash. It's like a 10-foot leash. And then it's like, you get hammered, you get smashed on the inside, or you get held under. And, you know, when people talk about their boards tombstoning, it's so bizarre as a surfer because you're like, well, I'm like, if the board's 8 feet and my leash is 10 feet and I'm at the bottom, like I'm 20 feet under, like,
So
how's that
gnarly.
possible? You know, and as you said, it's like there's always multiple sets. So you pop it up and there's another one, you back down, and it is, it's intense.
But not only that, like I feel like sunset's the kind of place where every other spot, if you get hit by a set, it will wash you in. But
Yes,
sunset's the kind of
yes.
place that actually keeps you in that one impact zone. And so you come up, you're like, all right, sweet. The next wave won't be as powerful because I'm already like, I've moved 20 meters in. Nope. The next set lands right on your head again. And it's just like the same impact of like, well, I don't even know what it's comparable to, but it's wild. It's scary stuff.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it is like every other spot on the planet. You're like, well, I just got my ass kicked and I lost my board and I'm way out here. But like, I can take the like wounded pelican approach of just getting like garbled up onto the beach over time. And at sunset, they're like, nope. If anything, we're going to push you out the back.
It's wild. It's honestly like that scares me more than pipe, hands down. Like it scares me more than any reef break. Because at least you know what you're going to get with the reef.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be hard and it's going to be sharp. And if you fall, you're probably going to hit it. But with sunset, it's just a mixed bag. I mean, you don't have that imminent fear of like getting a reef cut, but drowning for me, I feel like maybe that's my little deep down fear. Maybe something happened when I was young and I don't remember. But so I don't know. It's wild.
Well, as I said, well told, and thank you for that story. And thank you to Kraken Rum for sponsoring that segment. We're going to take one more break to get a word in from our sponsors, and when we return, we are going to wrap it up with Isabella Nichols. All right, we are back. This is the Lineup Podcast. I am Dave Prodan here with Australia's Isabella Nichols. We were talking about this before the break, but your career on the CT, specifically the last few years, one of the interesting things has been, for surfers that are good on the CT, they've qualified, their season ends in August, right? And it doesn't pick back up until end of January. So they have quite a lengthy off season, one that kind of never existed before. And I think this year more than ever, men and women, I saw so many people just go, yep, I'm in Indo now. I'm in Indo now. I'm in Indo now. And it's later season for Indonesia. It's still well within season, but I'm like, man, this never used to happen under the old design. And it feels like such an interesting opportunity for the world's best to like decompress, recharge, surf a ton of waves, get some content, but broadly that kind of off season, like how has that been for you as an athlete? Not Indo specific, but I just mean having that amount of time.
Yeah, the year that I qualified through the CT, made the mid-year cut. I think our season finished end of August with Tahiti, and to have that 4-month break, disregarding COVID, because COVID was the longest break I'd ever had.
Right.
That for me, having 4 months off from contest was like such a foreign feeling, because I feel like even when I was on the QS, like I was saying in the previous format, we had about 10 to 12 events, whether they be 1 stars, 3 stars or 5 stars, that we would be going to all the time. So to have 4 months off, it was incredible. Like, and for me, I love spending my time at home. So I feel like I spent most of my time chilling, getting ready. That season for us, like from August to October, we get really good waves.
Right.
And then from October to December, it's kind of pretty dismal, but that was when I just recharged the batteries. But I feel like this format really suits the surfers that get on tour and stay on tour and don't have to do the Challenger Series. They get that opportunity to just like improve on their surfing and get better and better. And then for me, the last 2 years heading back to the Challenger Series, I found it quite difficult to like work on technical stuff and technical surfing and improving my surfing while also trying to like perform in the CS events.
Right.
So I feel like it definitely benefits those surfers that can like, all right, put in a couple of years requalifying through the tour and then using that time to better themselves as surfers. But in saying that too, now I've got 2 months off, so I can go to WA, or I can maybe go to Indo if there's still waves. It's been a good season, so hopefully there is. But the time off is key. Like traveling the world is, we're so privileged, but what a lot of people don't see is the hours, like the crazy hours that we wake up to go surf the contest site with 1,000 people and battle and try catch waves. The hours on an airplane, like it's tiring. Like I'm tired. I'm ready to be done for the year for sure, as I'm sure everyone is. But the time off is crucial.
Yeah, well, and I mean on that note too, right? So we've got a couple months off. The first event, it is at Pipeline. There's really no other wave like it on the planet. What's your timeline for getting over there for the start of the season? Are you the kind of person that's going to be on the North Shore for a few weeks ahead of the start of the year, or do you plan just to get in kind of right before the season starts?
Previously, I got to Hawaii start of January, and then the contest would start end of January. But the last few years, I've felt that period has been really chaotic. Like everyone comes over for Christmas. Every man and their women and their dog are there trying to get waves. And I think this year I'm going to try to do a strike mission either in November or December. I've lined up working with Shane Dorian for Pipe, which is really exciting. He's one of the OGs, and I've watched him with his athletes through the contest over the past few years. And the way that he approaches surfing the wave is, I feel like, very calculated, very analytical, and that's kind of the way that I see myself working at that wave. So I think I'm going to go spend like a week or two with him over there in like pre-Christmas, so that I can really get like a training block done, feel like I've accomplished something, and then come into the Pipeline contest not feeling already burnt out, because spending 3 weeks in Hawaii for anyone, like especially trying to get used to a wave, and we were trying to get used to 2 waves, it was really draining for me. And Hopefully this new approach can be different and something exciting for me.
That's interesting to hear you say it because I've heard it both on the men's and the women's side. It's like it can be just psychologically draining every day if you're there and pipelines on and it's difficult to get waves, on the easiest of days. That crowd is so elite and has that wave on lock. And even talking to CT surfers, they're like, do I surf it? Do I surf another wave? Like, if I don't surf it, am I like missing an opportunity? If I do surf it, do I go out for 4 hours and get one wave? Like, I could see it kind of bouncing in the other direction where it's like I had too much time here and I'm a little cooked.
It's honestly like people who get waves there, I feel like they're fine. They're not in this conversation. But for myself, in context, I got there for New Year's 2 years ago. I got 2 really good waves on New Year's Eve. And then I did not get a single barrel until my heat at the end of January. So waking up every day, like you've got this constant like FOMO, like there's waves at pipe, I need to be surfing it. But then you have this like angel devil kind of like on your shoulder balance where it's like, all right, yes, I got to spend time out there. But in the same context, like you were saying, it gets draining. You get in your head. I think like the self-confidence dial gets turned down just like a notch every time you paddle out and you can't catch a wave.
Right.
So you need to find a way to like combat that. And there's times where I'm like, okay, if this isn't productive, like I'm going to make it productive. I'm going to figure out where the lineup is on this swell. Where would I sit in a heat? Not necessarily sitting there in the free surf because obviously the crowd is chaotic, but if you can come away with like one little bit of data in every session, I feel like that's a way this year that I approached it, and it definitely worked for me a lot better mentally, where I wasn't coming away from surfing pipe or sunset and literally being in tears because I had no idea how to surf the wave.
Right. That's interesting. I mean, you mentioned there are people who get waves, and there are. I'm sure it's a tiered system. But I mean, we've had Nathan Florence on here, and he's like, man, sometimes I go out there for 4 hours and I don't catch anything. Like, and it is just one of those lineups where you're like, yeah, like if I'm in the spot. And I think too, because it is such a dangerous wave and it is a little bit shifty and the ideal takeoff spot is, 5 feet wide on every wave. Mm-hmm. And you've got 80 people out there and 80 like elite level surfers out there. It's such a roulette even being in the spot, even if you're someone who can get a lot of waves out there.
It's the hardest wave I've ever surfed in the world. Free surf. In a heat, super clear. You know where to sit. You know what waves take off on. But in a free surf, right. It's every single person wants a piece of it. And I understand why. Like, it's a beautiful wave. Social media and the internet has blown this wave up to be like right. The scariest wave in the world. Like the world title was decided here. It's the wave, I feel, in my opinion. And people come here from when they're like 10 years old trying to master it, and I don't know if it can ever be mastered. There's probably a few people who can surf it better than anyone. John's one of them, Jamie O'Brien, like a bunch of the other crew. But like it also excites me too because it's definitely like growing up on the Sunshine Coast where we have like 2 foot waves consistently over sand. Being thrown into the deep end now, having to learn pipe and not ever having like a window where it's uncrowded. It's a good challenge. Like I love a challenge, and it's been a good one. It's been a really difficult one for me, but watching how much the girls have like thrived in those conditions over the past 2 years, and then watching the semis and the finals of the girls at pipe this year was probably one of the most inspiring things that I've ever seen. And it's like I'm already excited. Like I just want to get to pipe now and just learn it and just be immersed in like that environment again, whether it is like confronting or emotional or daunting. Like there was times, and another story that I have is like I paddled out for my heat, or I paddled out in a free surf before my heat at pipe one year. It must have been 2 years ago. It was a big day. And I was so wide. I was so wide. I was in the clear, had my helmet on. I was like, I'm going to sit on the shoulder and just like get a feel for it. And the set of the day comes through. It's probably like it was a 10-footer, and it landed square on my head. And me being the dumb one in this situation decided to try and duck dive the wave. And it was so violent that my Gath helmet broke. like the ear things got blown out. Like my helmet was like, and I just came up going, that was insane. I have to paddle out in the heat in this in like an hour. But it's just so exciting. Like I freaking love it.
It's awesome. We over here at the lineup run the Vissla CT Shaper rankings. It's exciting. Get to crown the shaping world champ every year. It's been Matt Biolis's the last 2 years, but recently you've been a DHD team rider, Darren Handley, top 5 finisher on this year's rankings, and huge fan and huge participant of the CT Shaper rankings. I think at the WSL Awards earlier this year, he was pretty animated about wanting to win it. What can you tell us about working with Darren and his, not only his boards, but the other team riders that are on the program?
Darren's incredible. Like, as everyone knows, DHD boards are, in my opinion, I feel like they're the best boards in the world. He makes an incredible board for right hand points, hailing from Burley Heads. Like, it makes sense. But working with DH over the past, like, I've been working with him since I was 14 or 15, and I feel like my relationship with him over the past 4 years has grown a lot into something that's been really cool and exciting. And he's been able to shape for some incredible surfers, and he has so much knowledge of how a surfboard works that I've even like been able to jump into the bay with him and watch him shape and shape boards myself. I mean, like, I'm not great, and I'll do something, he'll be like, here, give me that. That's the way, that's not what you do. I'm like, I'm not coordinated in that sense. But yeah, Darren's super communicative now. Like, he's been messaging me through Brazil. He's been really like helping me all year. And this latest batch of boards that I've had from him, we've tweaked a few things and the boards feel incredible. But yeah, he's just very meticulous in what he does, and he puts in a lot of time and effort. I feel like he's the kind of guy that reciprocates the time and effort that you put in. So if I were to chase him and rock up at his office and just chat with him and tell him how I'm feeling and how my boards are going, like, he reciprocates that kind of attention that you give him. And that's what I've learned over the past few years. And yeah, when you get him one-on-one, he's just absolutely amazing and very meticulous.
Yeah, and we've had him on the podcast too. He's such a good storyteller and has had such an amazing career. But, you know, also having like a surfboard shaper that it was and is an elite level surfer himself, like he kind of understands what you need as a competitor in a way that it's only unique to the people who've done that.
Not only that, if you've asked him about his sprinting and his AFL accomplishments, he's actually a really good athlete, like not just surfing, but I think he's like Australian champion, like over 50s or 60s in sprinting, something crazy like that. Yeah.
I love this reveal. This is excellent. Yeah,
so do ask him next time you see him, and he's a good AFL player too. So
I'm going to look for footage. Like, there's got to be footage of Darren Handley winning, you know, over 50s races in Australia.
Guarantees there will be something on the web. So he just understands what it is to be an athlete and the time and effort that we put in. And I think he even had like Liam and Jacob come in and work for him for a bit while they were like getting ready for the tour and the QS. And he's just really supportive of his athletes.
Do you have a go-to model with him at the moment?
I really like the number 8 Steph model. That's like my go-to for all-round good waves. At the moment, though, like through the Challenger series, as we were speaking, like the waves sometimes can be a little bit fatter. I've moved to like the Utopia model, which is it is his small wave board, but we've made it into a hybrid where we've stretched it out just a little to make it work in good and bad waves. So the last 2 events, that's what I've been riding. And weirdly, I've also been loving like a quad fin setup, but not a quad fin setup. This might be very weird, but like I'll get a board and I'll have like a 3 fin placement, and that doesn't work, if the board doesn't work, I hand it back to Darren and he just puts in like 2 extra fin plugs, and I still ride it as a thruster, but those like 2 extra fin plugs or fin boxes in the board sometimes makes the tail feel a little bit stiffer for me. And I've had like a board that I've gone, oh, this one's no good. He puts in the extra fin plugs and I've won. I won Narrabeen twice on it, and I've had like all my best results on that board.
Whoa. So like a phantom quad. That's what we should call
Phantom,
this.
yeah. So
like this is interesting.
Yeah, so it's very, very interesting for me because Darren, sometimes I feel like he thinks that it's in my head, and it probably is, but he's really cool because he goes with it. He's like, you know what? Hand it back. Let's put in the 2 fin plugs. See how it goes. More often than not, it works really well after that.
Do you mess around with materials like EPS or anything, or are you just mostly polyurethane?
I've never been an epoxy gal. I'm not quite sure why. I wish I was. And I've had a carbon fiber board shaped through America via DHD, and I feel like that was good. But I'm just a standard PU person, and
Hey.
I like to play with the fins and the board itself rather than going to alternate materials.
Makes sense. As we said, there are so many variables in surfing. It's
too many variables.
I don't need to get paralyzed by board decisions here, but very interesting. Well, I'm sure DH and the DHD team will be thrilled to have you back on, and I'm sure he's going to be gunning for the 2025 Vissla CT Shaper of the Year title. We put out a feeler for questions for you at the Lineup Pod on Instagram. We got a ton back, but we've pulled them down to 3 for you. First question is from Borning Grief, who asks, what is your pre-event routine?
Good question, and it varies through the years. My old pre-heat routine back when I was a young tacker was blasting some Taylor Swift tunes in the car and singing at the top of my lungs to wildest dreams. Nowadays, I actually, in a weird way, like I don't really like having headphones on because I feel like I almost like block out the world, and I don't like being so secluded from people. I like being normal, having conversations. Maybe like 2 heats before, I'll have watched a few heats in advance, and then 2 heats before or a heat and a half before, I'll get into my wetsuit or my bikinis or suit, whatever, start doing like a light warm up. And then the key for me over the past year has been like just doing a bit of deep breathing / yoga nidra on the beach, where like I do 4 in, 6 out, or if I'm feeling like 4 in, hold, 4 out, I kind of just feel how my body is. And then I like from my fingers all the way down to my toes and then up to my head, I like try and activate every single little muscle in my body. And then it's go time. So that's the extent of the warm up. Sometimes if I need to like get myself hyped up, I'll do some fast nasal breaths. If I'm feeling really stressed and like worked up, I'll do some like slow deep breaths, but it's kind of like my body tells me how I'm feeling.
It's a great question. Good answer. And I'd imagine it's an answer that like 99% of the tour would be able to give theirs right away because it's so ingrained. But maybe that's something that also has changed in the last 25 years. It's like maybe 1% 25 years ago could tell you. The other one's like, I don't know. I grab my jersey and I walk out there.
Sometimes that works. Hey,
Hey, I feel you. Next question is from Tree Hat J, who asks, who has been your biggest surf style inspiration, past and present?
I feel like Steph growing up, she was always and is my style inspiration. I don't think I surf anywhere near as pretty as her, but one day if I'm able to look half as decent as her on a wave, like I'll be stoked. I don't know, she's just so graceful but so powerful and so precise at the same time. Like she manages to get those hooks in the pocket without even looking like she's trying, but they still have so much oomph. And I think she's been able to stay relevant for so long, and I'm actually really excited to see all of the free surfing clips that she's going to release soon, because obviously she's been off with Rip Curl and doing a whole bunch of like trips, and I've seen photos but not any footage, and I'm like properly excited to see the clip that she drops because it's always just like watching someone like dancing on a wave and the canvas is just like painted with beautiful lines.
Well said. I'm excited to see those two. It's, you know, and you know what, Steph? It's October. Chop chop. Put this
I
thing
agree.
out.
We want give the people what they want.
We've been good. Last question is from Dave1D Car 3 Sin. I guess that's David Carson, who asks, aside from Coolum, what's the Sunny Coast's best break?
Oh, I'm going to be short for this.
We can bleep it out if you need us to.
No, it's all right. I think it's pretty blown out now anyway, but there's a break called Watala near Kawana, and I used to have gym training down that way about 3 times a week, and it's close to that. It's like 30 minutes from my house. So I'd always bring a surfboard, and it's like, I'd say it's like the of the Sunshine Coast.
Oh,
there's always something
after
it's
my
punchy.
own heart with that comment for sure.
It's a beautiful wave, and Sunshine Coast sometimes lacks a bit of oomph. There's definitely amazing waves on the Sunny Coast, but the reason why I moved to the Gold Coast was for the variety. And Watala was the one place where I felt like you could really like attack a wave and it would push back on you. So that would be like, and also in saying that, the Noosa Points are the best. I would almost go to say like the best wave in the world on its day. Like we have one day a year where it's like really good. And then there's a few other swells through the year, but like Nationals, Tea Tree, and First Point, incredible waves.
Great answer. And producer Miguel, he's going to have to bleep out all our mentions of that's our ongoing thing on this podcast.
Oh, really?
I brought it up with Mick Fanning years ago, and he's like, that is the best way. And I'm just like, don't tell people. And I'm like,
it actually, no, it's okay. So the word's already out there. I like barely surf unless like I'm looking at the cams and there's no one out, and I'm like, because it's honestly it's almost more crowded now than Snapper. Like it's absurd.
It's insane. Yeah.
I go down, there's no car parks anymore. Like,
oh no, it's just so reliable. Like, cause I'm like, oh, I don't have to look. Like I just go 6 a.m., hop over the hill, out you go.
And like whether it's half a foot or like 5 foot, there's always a wave.
Always a wave. I have no complaints. Well, thanks to everyone who wrote in at the lineup pod. We are now down to our final segment. It's time for the lightning round. These are 10 questions that you've answered before, actually, but you can answer as quickly as possible. We'll see if your answers match up from last time. First question. If you can only have one board set up for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Twin fin with stabilizer.
Okay, that's I'm with you. Actually, this is my exact answer. Last time you said twin fin, but
we want to resemble like some sort of high performance, so we got the stabilizer there.
I'm with you. It's the most versatile setup. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Burrito or pizza?
Burrito.
Last book you read?
Where the Crawdads Sing.
Oh, did you like it?
I loved it, and then I watched the movie and I loved it too.
Okay. Best surf film ever?
Nike 6.0, Leave a Message.
Same answer. I like that.
Always. The GOAT.
What is one wave you never have to go back to?
That I actually don't want to go back to, or I never actually have to.
Either, however you'd like to interpret the question.
Huntington Beach.
It's fair. I think last time you said Oceanside, so beach break's a beach break. If you only get to surf one wave for the rest of your life, and you can dreamcast it, just you and your friends, perfect conditions, which wave would that be?
Lakey Peak.
Same one, okay.
Same one?
Best person to share a lineup with?
Oh, I'm going to have to say it's either my dad or I feel like Fitzy's a good one to share a lineup with.
Okay.
Sally. Yeah.
All right. Dad was the answer last time, so now he's got some competition.
He does.
Worst person to share a lineup with?
Anyone who snakes and drops in.
That's a good answer. You named your dad last time. He got.
You know what?
Double
I retract
barrels.
that statement. my dad also for that question. And the reason why is because I always feel like I feel guilty that I'm catching too many waves. So I start giving him all my waves. I'm like, take it.
This is I am. You know what? My little guy is getting into it. That's good psychology. When he's like he's already like a better paddler than me. I'll be like, hey, come on, get out of here.
Love it.
Last one. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by
going on a surf trip to Indo.
You and I both. Isabella Nichols, congratulations on an awesome year again. So good to talk to you. We could have talked for hours, but thanks for coming on the lineup. Can't wait to hear about your off season, and I will catch up with you down the track.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. Always a good time.